This is a special edition. We'll be taking time to reflect on our journey.
And it was funny because we hadn't met in person yet, but we were like, listen, we got that same mindset.
And, just want to take some time to just review what we've shared with the audience, the guests we've had. We've hit top 10 in various countries, in various occasions in the rugby area, and even in some of the sports categories, which was brilliant.
It's incredible how there's some commonalities and common traits that have kept coming up and that we have seen.
Man, I'll be honest with you, this podcast has been a saving grace for me. When you work on those key areas where you're not as good at it, anything is possible.
We've had some cracking guests, we've learned a lot, we've enjoyed the journey.
The clear message he gave us that the main thing needs to remain the main thing. I used to remember back in the day, you would give him a big hit and then he was like, beers tonight, let's go. Do you want people just that are cheerleaders around you? Or do you want people that are telling the truth? Guys are just kind of like boosting your ego.
I'm pretty proud of how it's helping people, really helping people and impacting them positively.
Do it!
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode on our Lessons from the Game podcast with my co-host Ben Pegna. This is a special edition. We'll be taking time to reflect on our journey since we've launched this podcast all the way back in February. It's been an exciting few months. A lot has been happening, a lot been going on. Both of us have been under the pump. But Ben, before we do that, just check in, man. How's things going
good,
in the UK?
Thanks, mate. Yeah, we had a bit of summer, bit of sunshine, not so much anymore. But yeah, all good, busy. Pre-season started for a lot of people, so out and about. It seems to see, the new season seems to come around pretty quick. So keeping busy and just general stuff. What about you?
Oh man, time flies. Just spent this weekend. La Rochelle's been great, just getting everything sorted and heading back to connect with the family. But it's been unbelievable. I think we mentioned that when we spoke in the week, sometimes it's so important just to take some time to reflect and just recover as well. Since I've came back from South Africa, did a seminar, and then I went to the Water Rugby weekend with all the former players here in France, and then I had a full-on rugby camp for a whole week. And I was planning to do a lot of stuff last week, and I was just dead. I just relaxed and just enjoyed just spending time with my good little girls. So it was quite
busy,
cool.
Mate. You've been
bit of a mini holiday.
Busy,
yeah. No, same as you, man. Same as you. Ben, can you believe it? It's been now, 5 months actually? Not to the date, but if I think correctly, 18th of February, that's when we launched our first episode. And I remembered we were stop-starting the whole time. And, just want to take some time to just review what we've shared with the audience, the guests we've had, the process, the journey. It's been unbelievable. I just want to say thanks to you, my man. It's been unbelievable. And we're only getting started now. But I think to all our audience to kind of give you guys some insights, what we've achieved over this last few months. Firstly, we've hit top 10 in various countries, in various occasions in the rugby area, and even in some of the sports categories, which was brilliant. And we could not have done that without you guys. Our Instagram following has grown. We've hit over 2,000 followers, close to 3,000, and also our YouTube channel has grown as well. Ben, I didn't even share this.
1,000.
We hit the 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, that's good, man.
Yeah, so maybe we can do some other stuff right now, but who knows? But all of that would not have been possible without your help, and that's why we would like to ask you guys to continue to help us to grow the show by sharing the podcast with your friends. And also, if you got unbelievable friends that have a story to tell, a current athlete, former athlete, a coach, or someone that can contribute to the discussion, that definitely will be welcome.
Today's Lessons from the Game episode was possible thanks to the support of Harris Begley Financial Planning, headed up by former Blackheath player Matt Begley. They are the experts to speak to for tailored advice on investments, mortgages, insurance, and pensions, helping you plan for a future of financial security. So when you think money, think Harris Begley and head to www.harrisbegley.co.uk. Approver Quilter Financial Services Limited and Quilter Mortgage Planning Limited, March 2025.
Let's maybe talk about our journey on this podcast. It started out more than a year ago. I think this has almost been now 2 years in the making.
Maybe more, mate. Maybe more. Back. I mean, when we first spoke about it, it's a few years ago, wasn't it? But then, a couple of false starts, and then we just said we've got to bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah, and I think just for maybe people that are listening to our podcast maybe today for the first time, Ben, to give them a bit of a background story. We only met for the first time in Toulouse last year at some stage. I think it was the first time, and we've known each other for years. I think one of the reasons we decided to do the spot is because of the chemistry we had on Clubhouse, and we just realized we were passionate about a lot of similar topics. And we actually missed that space on Clubhouse, and that's why we got back on the podcast.
It's funny, actually, when you mention that, it doesn't actually feel like that's the first time we met, and it's been good. It's an exciting journey, and I think one of the things that we always speak about and comes up with some of our guests is when you're doing anything, people say you just start. It's not going to be perfect at the beginning, and they talk about just starting. And it was funny because we hadn't met in person yet, but we were like, listen, we got that same mindset, a growth mindset, and an outlook where we just want to make it happen, and we can make loads of excuses because we're busy, got families, lots of commitments. You're coaching at the very top of the game, and but we said, look, we just got to start, and so almost 6 months later, half a year later, we've had some cracking guests. We've learned a lot. We've enjoyed the journey. We're learning a lot every day, which it's put us out of our comfort zone, hasn't it? So mate, it's been great so far.
Oh, man, it's been a good laugh. If you think about it, in the beginning, when we used to review these episodes, we both would get on the call after like, what was I thinking? Why did I say that? I'm and eyeing a lot. And we were eating our own words. And sometimes, we made so many mistakes. But anyway, it's been brilliant. And if we look at the evolution, Ben, think about it. We first had a friend helping us out with the editing. We really started with scratch, both of us. We don't have state-of-the-art equipment. That's not what it's all about. And we just said we're going to be consistent. We're going to get it started. And you just mentioned it there. It's not about perfection. A lot of people put in those self-imposed obstacles and saying, no, it's too hard, it's too tough. I can't do this. I need that. And we're just getting started. And how we've evolved is we managed to get a VA. So we've got a VA now that is producing our episodes. And that's been brilliant. And it's just unbelievable to think where everything started. And once again, we would like to thank our audience. That's because of you guys, that you guys are continuing to support our episodes, our podcasts, and also all our different social media platforms. But Ben, I've got a question to you because we're rambling about it. Let's get our audience a bit engaged and let's get them get their thinking hats on. What I would like to know is we both experience this journey differently, but what would you say? What did this podcast journey mean to you so far? Has it brought you anything?
Yeah, I think when I think of coaching, and actually I always had this mindset when I was a player as well, because wherever I went to play, I coached at the same time. So when I was playing in the Premiership in England, I coached at the local school, and I went back to my old school and coached. And I've always loved helping people fulfill their potential. That's one of my drivers. And as this journey's evolved, we've been able to do that. We're helping people fulfill their potential. It's primarily coaches and players, but then we get messages from parents who suddenly come back to us with feedback and say, I was listening in the car with my son, and my daughter, and we listened to this together, and it was really insightful how you guys talked about that and how that shed light for us and how I've always thought of it like this. And it triggered the conversation with my son, and that made it easier for us when I was chatting with my daughter about how she was going to, join this team and how to handle this trial and this, all these types of things. So from that point of view, there's so many things that have happened that I didn't expect to happen. And I wasn't, we didn't go in with it with targets saying we've got to reach X amount of people and we've got to be, the biggest, best. We were just trying to, learn as we went and put something out there to help, even if it was just one person. So when I think what it's meant, I'm pretty proud of how it's helping people, really helping people, and impacting them positively. So yeah, it's and I know, like we said, it's not perfect, but it's improving, and it is adding some value, so that's good. What about you, mate?
Awesome. I mean, I'll be honest with you. This podcast has been a saving grace for me. If we look back to the season we had at La Rochelle, it was tough, man. I think we went 3 months without a win at some stage, and getting up every single Sunday, reviewing the game, going through what we did wrong, preparing notes, preparing your meetings for the following day. And it was just like rinse and repeat the whole time. And I'll be honest with you, this podcast really helped me in the sense that listening to our guests, listening to their stories, the challenges they faced, especially the coaches, stuff that they experienced and their journey, where they've gone through, that really helped me and inspired me. And it gave me really the kick in the butt that I needed, in the sense of, we can always focus on what's going wrong, but are we focusing on the solutions and what we can do to improve? So this was really great for me. This podcast, I really enjoyed this journey, and I didn't realize how much I missed the space, Ben. And I think, like I always tell people, I do this podcast because I'm passionate about sharing. I'm passionate about inspiring, and the things I've learned. That's why I always share. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Both of us, we're not perfect. That's not what we're trying to portray here. We're not trying to be a rugby show either. It's like really sharing authentic stories and helping our audience, the younger players, the aspiring coaches, people or parents, parents that are looking for motivation, inspiration, so they can just continue the 9-to-5 job and, find a way to move forward. And I think what this has shown me, Ben, and we got a lot going on at the moment, both of us, who we go on different journeys, but we're now also in the process of building something together, which is great. We've got some workshops that are coming in the future. We got some seminars going on, which is great, which is brilliant. But this has definitely been a clear example for me. It's just about getting started. It doesn't have to be perfect. And it's also given me the kick in the butt because for quite a long time, I've been working on my Scrum membership website. And sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm making any progress. But once again, I really doesn't have to be perfect. I just need to get it launched. So I'm going to do my best to get that sorted.
It's good, mate. That's some great points. And I don't think there's I can't think of one occasion where we've got off a podcast and we haven't been energized by or inspired by the conversation with the person, and quite often we're, maybe filming in the evening after our day's done, and, we're trying to catch up with somebody in New Zealand at a different time zone, and but we're still buzzing, when we come off it, because we've been inspired and motivated by the people, and I'm sure people listening are as well.
I used to hate our podcast, which we used to have at 10 in the evening, because like you just mentioned, then that adrenaline is still
a bit like a night match, isn't it?
And we're just super excited. Yeah, we're just super excited.
A bit like an evening kickoff,
and I think, Ben, also we need to mention to all our guests that we've had on, what they brought 100%. To the podcast and what they shared during the respective episodes. We've learned a lot, and wow, where do we get started? There are so many great guests we've had on the show, and we said from the beginning, we're not going to be a podcast that's just chasing your so-called big names, elite profiles. It's about people that can bring something to the table, people that are willing to share their story and inspire those around us. And I felt we've stuck to that. And you mentioned there, we're not driven by the numbers, the stats, the charts. All of that is just a great, indicator of the effort we've put in. But we had so many great guests. And I think to make this one fitting, I want to start off with our first one, who was Anthony Watson. Man, what a legend. Unfortunately, his career came to an end due to injuries. There's been a lot of pain, and it was great to hear his story as well, and also to hear your story, Ben, because you guys were sharing something similar. Guys who were struggling with the back, and I know you are still struggling with your back today. So anything that stood out with that episode with Anthony Watson?
What I was going to say as well, definitely about Anthony, but what's been incredible, and I think it's a strong takeaway for people listening to this today, And if they've just stumbled across this podcast for the first time today, and I'm not saying this because this is our podcast, I really encourage you to listen to some of these episodes. And what you'll find, and the point I'm making is, it's incredible how whether it's Anthony Watson, Ollie Phillips, Jeff Parling, Dennis Betts, Gary Gold, Victor Matfield, Ali Williams, Owen Franks, all these world-class performers, it's incredible how there's some commonalities and common traits that have kept coming up and that we have seen. And when I think of Anthony, the one that springs to mind immediately amongst a lot of good things was how he was, well, there's two actually. The first one is how he came back from his Achilles injury and how he owned the process and how he really had to understand his biomechanics, his anatomy, the physiology, so that he could break down the process and own the rehab and own that recovery and take control of his career. And so many players that you and I come across, they think it's like, I've gone to the physio fixes me, and then I go and leave, and they don't understand that. And that's a commonality that we have seen throughout all these conversations with other people. That keeps, they take control of their destiny. Jeff Parling, he was like, well, I'm going to take control of the line out. I'm a young guy in the team. I'm going to take control of it. I have to take ownership of something. Otherwise, so they're not passengers. And that was really good. And the other one was, I asked him about the high ball. Do you remember? Because I was like,
yeah, it was brilliant.
I was like, he's really, really good under the high ball. And he was like, no, but I was rubbish under the high ball, which for a kid listening, anybody listening, but if you're a young aspirational player and you in whatever sport, you're thinking, this is what I've been given, and so this is what my lot in life is, and I can't develop this. No, he said I was appalling under the high ball. But I went away and I broke down the process and I worked out how I could get my knee lift, how I could use so he trained, as you said, with boxing gloves to practice to make it harder, so that when he actually played, it became so much easier. And he broke down that was a really inspirational thing for me to hear, because it gives you, as somebody trying to improve a specific skill, it gives you some clear guidelines, but also the motivation to understand actually it's possible.
Yeah, it's like, what stood out with Anthony was during that time when he was injured, the clear message he gave us that the main thing needs to remain the main thing. And, in his story, we actually shared where he messed up. Once they messed up, he thought it would be harmless, everything would be fine, went for a photo shoot, caught a rugby ball, took a step back, and he snapped his Achilles again. And I think people don't realize what rugby players go through. If you got a job and, everybody's passionate about what they do, or not everybody, but if you're fortunate enough to be passionate about your job, you're working on different projects, if you have a niggly injury, you can still go on. But rugby players is different. You're no longer in the game. If you're not able to step on that field, and 18 months is long. We all go through dark times and everybody manages it differently. There's always something that happens. You end up paying the price, whether it's weight or it feels like a part of your soul has been taken. And a lot of people don't realize what it meant to him to play in that World Cup final. It was massive for him, after all the efforts. But the one thing that stood out as well is when he spoke about, his former teammate, Francois Lowe, about the whole effect of the compound interest, just those little efforts. And I think that's important. You just mentioned it there. He was really shit about under the high ball. He wasn't good at it, but he kept on working at it. He kept on going at it. And we mentioned this in our podcast as well. We spoke about the preseason, like how many reps are you putting in the week? They all start to accumulate. You start to get better. And it's like us in the podcast, man. In the beginning when we spoke, we were like, what do you think? Okay. We were like, we sounded super weird. Man. But now, like with practice and constantly reviewing each other, reviewing our performances on the spot, we've gotten better.
Apparently I still say awesome too much and amazing too much. And so apparently I've got to say broaden my vocabulary and that's incredible, fantastic, and a few other brilliant, such a good insight. Yeah.
What I actually realized, but I'm just going off topic now a bit. I'll come back to Anthony Watson. Is that I realized when I ask a question Like there's this like, okay, that's great. We'll deep dive into that a little bit later. And then I ask a question, but we never go into that deep dive. So that's one of my big workouts which we have to do. But yeah, Anthony was brilliant. And, also giving those insights when he moved to Leicester Tigers, the story he told about his flashy car, but also how great everybody at Leicester Tigers were, the humility, the way they welcomed him. He thought he only had to wear black boots and all those type of things.
And, on that one as well, mate.
Wow. There's so many.
And the really interesting thing is that, and as I mentioned, there's this commonality and there's a common thread amongst all the guys. So it's really easy for a young person somewhere, and I keep saying a young player, but it could be any player listening. It's really easy to think that's a God-given talent. That's like, they're just better than me. But when I'm just thinking of Owen Franks, the conversation with Owen Franks, you're suddenly thinking of this work ethic, of this, okay, he understood what he was good at, but then he amplified that and he became even better at that. And he said, look, this is what I'm good at. I'm more of a power athlete. And then he developed his game according to his strengths. And he really worked on that. And it's amazing how with a lot of the guys, they've worked on things. So with Anthony, it might have been that high ball. With Owen, it's like lots of other areas of his game that he then spoke about. And with other people, it's been other things as well. And so it's stuff that you can develop, if you want to apply yourself and break your game down and have a growth mindset. So that's been fascinating for me as well.
Yeah. Coming back to Owen, actually, something that stood out from Owen is that, like, we talk about work ethic, and that's like the common thread with all our guests. Like almost everybody we spoke about, it's a consistent efforts, consistent learning, putting in the hard work, asking questions. At the end of the day, you only have yourself to blame if you don't achieve it. Yes, there are sometimes external factors, Ben, that don't go your way, but you don't want to have regrets. Regrets come when you didn't put in the effort. You can be disappointed if you don't achieve your goals. Let's say, example, you didn't get that professional contract, you didn't get drafted, you didn't become a professional rugby player or professional coach. But if you look back at your journey and say, you know what, I gave it my best, I invested in myself, I sacrificed a lot, so I'm happy with that. I think that's the most important. But all these players, a lot of people see these All Blacks, the Springboks, it's about how hard they work. And if you look at the Boks today, yes, the Boks are in a great place. They're doing well. South Africa's got unbelievable talent. What the Boks are achieving today, it's not by accident. And that's another example I would actually like to bring in. And this is nothing to do with our guests. Before the Springboks played a very stereotyped style of rugby, the kicking game and just direct, running hard. All of a sudden now you see Eben Etzebeth passing behind the back. Guys are giving offloads. And then you see the Boks, they're alternating their kicking game with the new attacking style of play with Tony Brown. And a lot of people would say that South Africans are not capable of playing attacking style of rugby. And it's not we're not yet about to start a debate, Ben, but I think it comes down to when you have your strengths, and that's a great example we always talk about on this podcast. We all have strengths. You can amplify your strengths, but when you work on those key areas where you're not as good at it, anything is possible if you're just consistent in your efforts. You just keep on grinding out. And with Owen, that stood out as well. And it's the work ethic. We know what he stands for and what he did. But I think when he spoke about the big disappointments, and everybody we spoke to had this massive disappointment or this dark time or these tough times that they went through. In Owen's case, he was the last World Cup. I think it was 2019, if I'm not mistaken, Ben. And he wasn't selected. He kind of knew it was coming. And when he shared that story, but like he was more worried about how his family would take it. And just hats off to someone like Owen as well. I received a message from someone that is close to him as well, and they just said, how did you get him to speak that much? He normally doesn't. So, and I would just like to thank Owen as well for everything he was sharing with us. It's just unbelievable, and massive respect and hats off, and that he's taken that time to share it with us. But he then shared something interesting. He just went straight into it. After that disappointment, he went straight back to playing. He went to the Northampton Saints, and things didn't go his way. And when he mentioned this, you know, he should have maybe just taken just a minute to, you know, check things out. What's happening?
Yeah.
Where am I at? Where am I going? What do I want to achieve? You know, so that was quite
super interesting. Yeah. To process, to recalibrate, and all those things. And you know, when you say about hard work, the work ethic, you're 100% right. And I think too many players, especially in the UK, I would say, when you say hard work to them, they think of the gym. They think of when I think of the conversations we've had, and you think what the guys have done is they've all self-reflected. Almost all of them have been able to break down their own game or have a really hard look. So we mentioned Anthony. He talked about the high ball. Victor talked about some other stuff. You know, he had to go to a smaller province. He went to Griquas, and he had to reevaluate what he was going to do. And he broke down his game, and he's like, okay, I'm going to run the line out. And he had a guy that really backed him, Sways to Brain, really backed him. But he then became the guy, and he broke it down. And then he had to become this analyst of lineouts, and the same with Jeff Parling, actually. Other guys did other things, you know, they broke it down. So it's not just about, I go to the gym once a day or twice a week or 3 times a week. That's hard work. It's actually doing the hard yards and then breaking it down and then having that intentionality. And when I think of like all the guys, you know, Francois, Ali Williams, so even Shimi, you know, that was incredible as well. It's really fascinating.
Going to boarding school.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother pod. Like I said at the time, that's a whole nother podcast. I mean, that's a sink or swim right there, isn't it? But, you know, just quickly as well, with regards to Owen, I mean, that's also a reflection on your relationship with him, just to give you the respect and credit you deserve. You know, that's a reflection of how highly he values you, that he came on and was just so open from the outset. And so that's credit to you as well, mate.
No, thanks, man. But, you know, one thing, Ben, what I'm enjoying about the pod as well is reconnecting with former teammates, reconnecting with former adversaries as well, opposition opponents. You know, we always used to love it. I enjoyed Ali. Having Ali Williams on was brilliant, because we've had a few big nights back in the day when he used to come to Pretoria and I used to go to Christchurch or Auckland. We always there. And he spoke about something there which was important. And I'll be honest, I don't know if maybe it does exist. Maybe we don't see it, but I think it is there still today. He spoke about that mutual respect that we've had for each other's players, you know. And I used to remember back in the day, you would give him a big hit and then he was like, beers tonight, let's go. You know. Or Jerry Collins, you would give him a big hit and God rest his soul, he would say, you know, good one, man. Good on you. You know, it was always this respect. And I miss those Super Rugby days. Those were some unbelievable times. And, you know, just also reflecting on that, you know, Ben, speaking to former teammates, and unfortunately some players have left us over the last few years, and it's just, you know, makes you also realize it's very important to be grateful. Be grateful. I'm grateful for a lot of things: my health, my family, you know, my faith, everything. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be on this podcast with you. So many things, and I think sometimes when times get tough, people tend to underestimate that value of gratitude. And a lot of people think, okay, gratitude, journaling is a bunch of BS. Honestly, it's not. If you're actually open to it, it will help you a lot along the way. You know, I've been doing a lot of journaling lately, you know, where I'm going helps me to sort out my thoughts. What's the next step? You know, I've got a new chapter lying ahead, so I've got to prepare for that as well.
You're right.
But yeah, you know, wow, man.
And I think as players, you know, we're talking to players, we're listening to players. The perspective in life is a huge thing. And the guys that I think that comes up is they're really passionate, they work really hard, but they have a perspective. And I think of Ali, you know, when he talked of, I just spoke to my coaches like a normal person, you know. He didn't put them on this pedestal. He was just, well, that's an adult. I'm an adult. We have an adult to adult conversation. And as a result, it was very direct, some of the conversations he spoke about, but they were honest. And then they involved self-reflection. Even in the moment, if there was maybe a rebuttal initially, there was a self-reflection process. And that perspective in life where you go, this isn't the be-all and end-all. It's not everything. It's a game of rugby. But I do want to maximize my potential. I do want to fulfill my potential. But I just keep everything in its rightful place. It's amazing how the guys that have been successful have pretty much demonstrated that. I think of, Victor talking about his family and things like that, and both growing up in Petersburg and spending time, and how he did things. And then I think of some of the other guys, and it's just amazing how that was also come up as a trait, I think.
Something you just touched base on there, I think, which I think Ali Williams, he mentioned. He was talking about the importance of the relationship between a player and a coach. And that is very important. And it goes both ways. Yes, firstly, the coach, he needs to make that effort with the players. But if you're not going to be willing to be coached, if you're not coachable, if you're just going to be arrogant and not willing to speak and just stay shut off and think nothing is your fault and the coach is always wrong and all this stuff, it's tough. It goes both ways. Both parties need to come to the table. And I can tell you this, I've been on the side where I've experienced great coaching relationships, tough coaching relationships. I can tell you I will get along with a lot of players. Some players were very tough to manage. At the end of the day, you can't be working with blinders. Your perception versus reality. I always say to a lot of players, come on, guys, you need to be realistic. Are you actually being real with yourself? Are you being honest with yourself? Or do we have that whole concept of Instagram reality? Are you suffering from Instagram reality? Is that you think you're actually better than what you actually are and that it's no one's fault? And I've had time to reflect. And it's because we're on this podcast, I've been thinking about past disappointments, looking at the World Cup 2007. Why didn't I play in that final? I started those test matches before the World Cup. Looking back at it, what Os de Rand brought to the team, his experience, his, being that anchor in the scrum. Maybe at that stage, I couldn't provide that. Who knows? I'm still due to catch up with Jake White about that. But also having Gary Gold on the pod, mentioning there was a time Beast was just unbelievable. He had this, not shocky, he was having this brilliant season. He was like on top of his game and it wasn't expected. And that impacted my game time. And in that moment, I was always pointing out reasons why I should be playing. I'm better than him, and this and that. And players tend to let their ego overwhelm them or take control of them. And, I had an interesting chat that weekend of the Water Rugby, bumped into my former coach, Ugo Mola, and we just started about the chat. We just got started about, when he came in as a coach, and I congratulated him on everything he's achieved. It's been brilliant. It's been great to watch and see what he's done with Toulouse. It's unbelievable to see the dynamic they've created there in that club is just unbelievable. As a former player, seeing that, it's been great. When I was on the receiving side as a coach, wasn't that great. But he then shared with you, how tough it was when you have a group of experienced players. They've got this image about themselves. They think they're this good, but sometimes it's not. He needed to make some tough calls. And I said to him, I understand why you did what you did back then. Getting rid of all the older guys. You had to do it. Look what's happened today. Now as a coach, I understand it. So I think the lesson from that is, which I want to share with the players, is that really make an effort to have a good relationship with your coach. So yes, sometimes you might not agree with him, sometimes you might not like what he's saying, and vice versa for the coach as well. Sometimes a player might have a go at you. Don't take it personally. Try to understand where the player is coming from, because that is important. At the end of the day, that's what rugby is all about. It's about building a strong culture, and the foundation of that is the relationship between the player and the coach.
So many good points there, G. I mean, it's the adult-to-adult relationship that we spoke about before. It's the perspective as well. If you are going in with humility into a conversation, not thinking that you're above the player or not thinking you're anything special as the player, you're just having a normal conversation about how you can both do your jobs to the best of your ability. Then there's a lot of upsides there and a lot of room for growth for you to all improve. And I heard a story with Steve Hansen recently where he was late for a meeting and he walked in late, and Kevin Mialamu stood up and said, "Steve, it's not good enough. You're late," and he called him out. And Steve Hansen obviously might have been a bit embarrassed at the time or shocked, but to his credit, he said that it grew the environment. It grew. Everybody was accountable. We were just all humans. We're all doing our job. We all want the same thing. We all want to win in the weekend. And when I think of the conversations we've had, and you look at the commonalities with the different people, Victor Matfield was confronted by Jake White and told, your ego is getting in the way. You're making it about you. And Victor, to his credit, was obviously maybe defensive initially or put out by it, but then went away, reflected, and had to, change some things, but also knuckle down and improve and work on himself and put the team first, where maybe it was just a perception, but he really had to reflect, and he took it as a man, and he took ownership of that. He didn't moan and complain and then talk behind his back and then move club and then say, you can get stuffed. I'm gonna, and then Ali Williams had a similar thing with Graham Henry when he was his Blues coach. He didn't pick him for the Blues. He was on the bench, and Graham Henry turned around to Ali and said, well, I wouldn't have picked you last year for the All Blacks if I was the All Blacks coach, and he's like, well, I just played every test last year, how can you say that to me? But he went away and they had an adult conversation. And I think that is so important, what you're referring to. And Ugo, I've got so much time and respect for him. He shared a bit of that journey with me, when he was at Brive and he was at Albi, I think it was, and how it was tough. And then obviously going to Stade Toulousain, but dealing with those senior players, but he had to own that and have a look at himself and evolve as a coach, and just not think it's all about me, and get the best out of everybody around him. So I think the commonality that we keep seeing is these people are able to self-reflect, have these hard conversations, not take it personally, but grow from the experience, and amongst other commonalities,
But just coming back to Victor, I think there's a key part of that story which I think needs to be mentioned. We always talk about the importance of mentors. Charlie Farmuna mentioned it. A lot of other players, Owen Franks mentioned it as well. And having someone in your team that you trust, in your circle, your entourage or your inner circle. And the key guy there was Heineke Meyer. And it ties into what we just mentioned about the relationship between players. So, for example, Heineke Meyer, you wouldn't spend like 30 minutes with you having a chat. It would be very short, but you knew he had your back. And I just spoke to him. It was great chatting to him as well, recently. Hopefully he will come onto our pod, Ben. But, the guy there, Heineke, he said to Victor, but when Jake said all those things that it was flashy, but
that was...
And having someone in your corner that can actually be honest with you, that's important. It's like, do you want people just that are cheerleaders around you? Or do you want people that are telling the truth? Guys are just kind of like boosting your ego. That's probably we've all been there at some stage. I've been when I was a younger player, you for the first time you're earning some money, and then all of a sudden you meet these new people, you're buying drinks, you're paying the bill, etc. You never really know where you stand with certain people, and only as time goes on, you become a bit wiser. But it's having, and I think talking about Victor and you're talking about that self-reflection, I think that is very important.
And I think it's that
that you develop.
I think it's that humility that comes with that, isn't it? You and I, we go and coach at camps and stages, and I coach at a lot of lower league teams, and I'll go in and I'll do a session. And I'll meet players, and maybe you go back and that player's moved on, and you're like, why is that guy gone within the space of 2 months? Oh, he wasn't happy because he perceived this. And it's amazing how many times I see these really good players and they've got so much potential. And it's almost like you see why they haven't gone up a level, because it's this type of thing. it's like, okay, if I just knuckled down and listened here and didn't get offended and didn't take that personally and park the ego and actually just focused on me and not thinking they're trying to be nasty to me or they're humiliating me, then maybe I could kick on, you know? Did I say the magic word?
You said the magic word. I just wrote it here down here. Park Your Ego by Gary Gold's one of my favorite sayings. Yeah. Oh, man. Ben, that's so true. And I think, coming on that, because now that you've opened that can of worms with Park Your Ego, Gary Gold, when he spoke about that, he said, like, as a coach, you need to park your ego. You got to start somewhere. And that really hit home with me, because and it takes me back to when I started coaching back in the day. I was a volunteer at the amateur club. I was coaching under 15s. I was coaching guys who were nowhere close to being remotely semi-professional. I've coached in lower levels, and it was so enriching. And you also mentioned there's no better feeling as a coach to know that when you see a player do well, that you had a part to play in it. You had a role to play in that. And I think that's very important. And parking your ego, that's very important. I'll be honest with you. I kept that in mind 2 weeks ago when I was coaching 150 kids at the rugby camp, doing the same drill 6 times. How tense is that? In terms of the way you speak, the message you got across. And you know what? I enjoyed that whole week. It was unbelievable with the former players there, and the guys from Académie Internationale Rugby. It was we formed great relationships, and the mindset I had, because I'm on a new journey, and I made it clear, I don't want to remain a scrum coach. I want to be a coach, coaching the forwards, eventually one day becoming a manager of a team. I'm willing to park my ego step by step, starting where I need to develop the skill sets that I need to and all the experience I have over years. But I enjoyed coaching those youngsters because they would come to me. Because I was fully invested, I was there 100% all the way. I was all in. They would come to me after training asking questions. What can I do better? What do you think of this? I have a question on this. And I did a seminar, Ben, in French, and I was tired. We were coaching the whole day, and I did it like at 9 p.m. And when I'm tired, my French level takes a dip, and I was like messing up my words. But for some reason, I still managed to get through to those kids. And you know what? I was standing at the stage. I was like, it's 9 p.m. I could have been at home with my family. But you know what? I parked my ego, and I think that's so important. And I think actually we need to do a T-shirt.
Park your ego, yeah. I mean, that's great. When you reflect as well, it's a bit of a privilege being able to impact people's lives like that. That that could be the biggest thing they've done for the year or even longer. Just that 2 minutes you gave them, and that's really important, I think. And that's one of the beautiful things about a lot of sport, but rugby especially. It's amazing how you get that.
But Ben, talking about rugby, and this is a sport that we love, and we've shared that we are not perfect human beings. We make mistakes, and Ali Williams, he has mentioned he's had his fair share of things he did in the past which he shouldn't have done. But a guy that really stood out, which I was really impressed by, was Ollie Phillips.
Wow.
Ollie Phillips, he really did well at Stade Francais. And man, I didn't see that coming. The story he shared about being away and his ex was waiting for him in his house and he came home with another woman, all that. I was like, what are you sharing, man? But anyway, what stood out for me is that he was willing to share that side of him. He's going into the corporate space. He's helping people develop leadership skills. And he mentioned that he got a job opportunity without even having the skill set for that job, just because he showed certain abilities. He spent a month on a boat with someone and just being himself, encouraging people and helping them, getting to know them, showing interest in people. That is such an important trait. Like, are you taking the time to get to know your teammates? Are you getting the time to get to know the people you work around? And I think it stood out was his adaptability. His adaptability, going into a new job with no work experience and owning it. And now he's got a thriving company that where he's doing leadership conferences and seminars.
Yeah, and that growth mindset again. I sound a bit like a broken record, but he went into a place where it was really, really difficult. He didn't know all the jargon. Everybody else has been there for a long time, but they're reporting into him. He had there's a fair bit of imposter syndrome there, but there's this vulnerability, there's this openness, there's a humility to learn. But it was uncomfortable. But it's amazing how many guys we know who've come from the game and out into the corporate space or the real world or whatever you want to call it, and they've had to embrace that they may be starting quite low down the ladder. And as a result, they really are up against it, but they're outside their comfort zone, but they've been prepared to be outside their comfort zone. And it's amazing. Victor talked about it. Do you remember? He talked about sweeping or putting the chairs away, because it was the most, the CEO said on the Monday, it was it was like the most impressive thing. He just came in and he was just there willing to do the chairs. And I think you'd do the same, and I think it would be just what you would do. And I think most of the guys I know in rugby actually would probably do the same. But to his credit, he just cracked on. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about the ego, and it was about learning and that growth mindset, that humility. So, and that adaptability. It's amazing. Another example of these commonalities and these common traits that we keep seeing.
I want to switch over to my man, Richie Gray. Obviously, he's been a big mentor for me as a coach as well, and he actually guided me on his journey right in the start, Ben. But what he's shared, one of the phrases or quotes of Heineke Meyer, like, so what is it? Simplicity done brilliantly leads to greatness, or something like that. Okay. And that really spoke to me because, and I think if we look at a lot of our guests, it's about doing the simple things well. Just all the accumulating those efforts, those consistent efforts, and, looking at him, what he went through as a coach. And a lot of people don't get that there was a time he was redundant. He was made redundant by the Scottish Rugby Union. He didn't have a job. He took a month of pay leave because he had this vision. He believed in what he was doing. It didn't come off. He went back again to the job. And what he went through and the hardships, and he mentioned as well losing a friend. And, it was tough for him. But it was just so consistent. And now you look at him, he's consulting with different teams. He's coaching in the NFL. He was with the Philadelphia Sea Eagles. And I just really enjoy if you are a coach, right now listening to this podcast, we got some great coaches that were on the spot. Gary Gold. We had lots of great guys. We had Richie Gray. And we also had Omar Monami as well. There's lots of great guys that need to get stuck into this. AB Zondag. They brought out the book, by the way, so he's agreed with his dad to come on the podcast and talk about their book, Attack.
Beautiful.
Attack.
And that's been a journey I've sort of seen from the side. His dad was my coach at London Scottish and Saracens a long time ago, and I'm not going to say exactly when, because it was a long time ago. But I've seen, all you need to know is I've known AB since he was a boy, since he was running around as our ball boy, So, it's an amazing. And again, with Gary, he spoke about that when he went to the US. He talked about how he had to simplify things. And I think Victor talked about it again when he went back to the Bulls, and he said, and Heineke Meyer said to him, look, Victor, it's about everybody being on the same page. You come back to that lowest common denominator where everybody understands. It's not about doing something really complicated. And Omar spoke a bit about that, didn't he? And it's really interesting. Dennis Betts as well spoke about that, and just getting everybody to understand, and it not, as a coach who's coached in rugby league and rugby union. And with men and women, so it's interesting. It's fascinating from that point of view as well.
I think there was another thing that I just want to talk. I think Richie Gray, he mentioned it, and Adam Innes as well. All right, Adam Innes, what a great guy, S&C coach of Toulouse Olympic, and what they shared was about we coaches tend to forget you can't coach players. If you're coaching players, that's where you go. You're coaching human beings. You got to coach humans first. And I think that's a massive lesson that sometimes we tend to forget that even at the highest level, you're so focused on performance that you forget you're coaching humans first. And, spending 2 days with the box as well, just seeing that, we're looking at, I wrote some things down here, and from all our guests, the common threads that are coming down is work ethic, humility, that self-analysis. There's no egos, and that's exactly what I saw there. You could see there's a clear bond amongst the players and coaches. And you got Don Eman telling the guys to come get the Landbou Weekblad, He's a hotel room and stuff, all the farmers. And you can really see that the guys are open. And I think that's important, that the coaches listening, you got to focus on getting to know your players, because and I think you can't coach the way we've been coached. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I made in the past. I sometimes would coach the way I was coached, and it doesn't.
No, especially with generations and how times move, technology's moved, the way you have to speak to players has moved, the society has changed. You're in a different country to the one you grew up in. All of those things affect how we interact in society, let alone from a coaching point of view. But how about this for this then, as another one? How many of the guys, of all of the people we've spoken to, have put themselves or they've gone down the road less traveled? They've gone out of their way to do something very, very difficult. So think about Babawa. From a really hard situation in the Cape Flats, to making it onto the world stage. Think about when you mentioned Richie Gray then. Do you remember when he goes he's spoken to Heineke Meyer, he goes down to do his very first session, and as he's walking onto the pitch, Heineke says something like, don't screw this up, because this is your one shot, this is your, he's had to be bold. He's had to take himself out of his comfort zone. It's pretty big. I think of Dennis Betts growing up in a very hard, tough environment, and him then going as I think he made his debut for Wigan when he was 17. That is a road less travelled, and it's a hard, hard road. It's not for the faint-hearted. He had to be courageous and bold. I think of some of the others. They've not gone for the easy option. There's loads. If we break it down, I think we would actually go, okay, well, sorry, I keep mentioning Victor, but he's really stood out for me. Victor went to the Griquas. Some people would say, mate, why are you going to a smaller province? You're leaving that's a really big risk. But actually, that was a courageous move. He really backed himself. I think of Shimmy. Like you said, he went to boarding, maybe that wasn't all his decision, but he went to boarding school at the age of 5. Some really hard stuff, but they all demonstrated this courage.
No, there's loads. There's loads. We've covered so much, and I think there's so much more. I just wanted to share a story with you, and you were sharing about it earlier, talking about the work ethic and that respect, and something I focused a lot as a coach and as a young coach working on developer resilience. I still believe that is something which is being undervalued in teams, because sometimes players are weak. They need to have that ability to dig deep. They need to know that they have that resource when it gets tough in the trenches, that they can get back in the fight. And, funny, speaking to some of the younger players I coached here in La Rochelle in the academy a few years ago, obviously I'm done in La Rochelle now, and, we were just chatting via messages, and they all came back to me, Coach, we'll never forget those bear crawls. We'll never forget those 100-meter 9 to forward passes. I made them just run with the ball for 100 meters nonstop with collisions and hit shields. But you were talking about, I think it was Kevin Mialamu that called out Graham in for being late for training, or Steve Hansen. And that reminded me, I had this rule with the younger players. You had to be at the club 30 minutes before the first meeting. And I would actually do a proper roll call, like old school. I would write down the names who weren't there. For each player that wasn't there 30 minutes before, the whole team had to do 30 minutes of bear crawls. or not 30 minutes, 1 minute of bear crawl. So I think it was one day it went up to almost 12 minutes of bear crawls. And if they had to put their feet on the ground or their knees on the ground, they would start over again. So they had to dig deep, and I was hard on them. I was tough on them. They would train, like sometimes I would do some crazy stuff, and a lot of them came back to me and said, you know what, coach, we'll never forget that. That actually made us stronger. That made us realize we can go harder, we can do more. But then the one day I was late because I was finishing up some work for the pros, and I wasn't there 30 minutes before the time. And I missed the roll call. And the first thing the players did, coach, I think you owe us 4 minutes of bear crawls. And they just huddled around me. And they were shouting and screaming at me and saying the same stuff that I would say at them. Come on, you guys are weak, go for it, and whatever. And it was actually quite a great moment. And until still today, we talk about that. And
that's it. That's so good.
Just the story I wanted to share.
That's a great story. And for coaches, it's a really important one because I think it's the adult to adult thing. It's that everybody's vulnerable, everybody's real, everybody's on the same level, but we just got different roles to get this ship moving in the right direction. And Steve Hansen actually talked about that as well. He talked about how the guys would take the mickey out of him. And it's really important. The guys loved that. They loved you'd hear lots of funny stories. Yeah. And I remember hearing other stories from other All Blacks about that. I think Charlie mentioned a couple of them, didn't he? And we touched on some. But yeah, that's a great story.
All right, Ben, I think we need to wrap this up. Is there anything else you would like to add before we finish up?
It's good, G. I'm excited about the next 6 months, and where we're going to go from here. If people have got any recommendations of people that they would like to get on, we would love to do that. There's some good guests that we've got lined up. There's a lot of rugby at the moment. The Lions are playing. There's a Women's World Cup coming up, and we're excited about that. And we're hoping to get some really good guests on. It's please give us some feedback and any questions you have and anything that we can do better. We've spoken at length tonight about growth mindsets. So please, give us some feedback. Let us know what you think.
Just there's a lot of things I wrote down as well, but I think maybe to summarize everything that we've shared from our guests that we had on the show, the things that come back every single time is work ethic, consistent efforts, humility, no egos, being a student of a game, going that extra mile, going like you mentioned, the roads less traveled, getting through tough times. And also just that relationship as a human being is very important. But Ben, I really enjoyed this. And I think to everybody listening, Ben and myself are on a journey. We really want to grow the show and take it to another level. And if you know of anyone that can help us on this journey, we want to start moving over to in-person podcasts. And we do have a few sponsorship slots open at the moment. So if you're someone that is willing to help us and maybe guide us on this journey and your experience which you might have in the business world and the corporate space to help us grow the show, we really would appreciate that. But most importantly to our audience, we really need your feedback. If there's anything that we can do better, topics you would like us to discuss and guests to have on, please let us know. And please don't forget to leave a comment on our YouTube platform or Spotify when you're listening to these episodes. And I would definitely would advise coaches and players, take the time, go through our old episodes, write it down, ask us questions, send us DMs. We will always do our best to answer them as soon as we can.
Brilliant.
All right, but that's it, Ben. I need to get going. I need to finish up. I still need to go eat a pizza on the beach with my little girl and then head back to Toulouse.
Make me jealous,
tomorrow.
Man. Love it.
All right. Oh man. I'll try to run off the pizza tomorrow.
Give us a photo.
But anyway, guys, thanks for joining us. Thanks for all your support. I'll send you that photo. All right. Cheers, guys. Ciao.
Do it!